Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. Just a little technical problem, which is what we're trying to figure out. Okay. The title of this message is To Savor. That is, to savor. In Colossians 3 and verse 2, it says, Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on this earth. So I take it that we have a choice when it comes to our mind, what we set our mind on. We can set our minds on things above, or we can set our minds on things below. We can set our minds, if we so choose, on good things, or we can set our minds on bad things. We have the choice to set our minds on the positive or the negative. Now, that's a fascinating concept because often we don't think we're very much in control of our minds, and we come up with all kinds of excuses as to, okay, what's wrong with the way I think. But there is a thing called rumination. Ruminating is a cycle that your mind sort of gets locked into of negative thoughts or negative emotions. It's a continuous, can be a continuous vicious cycle where we are just over and over thinking about the worst case scenario. It's sort of like Murphy's Law. If anything can go wrong, it will. And that's sort of how we start our day out, thinking it's a fulfillment of Murphy's Law. It sort of dominates your thoughts. If anything can go wrong, it will. And then we start thinking about how it's going to go wrong and the process for which it's going to go wrong, and this negative scenario and that negative scenario. It's called ruminating. And again, it is a vicious cycle. It's very negative thinking. And, there's a lot of things that we can think about. We can think about past mistakes. Would have, could have, should have. I could have done that. I should have done that. I should have, would have, could have, should have is a very common, way that we sort of think sometimes negatively. I could have done better. And when you think about, well, who couldn't do better? I mean, that's a common ground for all of us. Then there are defining moments that we ruminate about, maybe things that took place earlier in childhood that we start thinking, well, I could have done better. Maybe you were forced into the role of a caretaker. You had to, maybe your parents were not there. Your father or mother were missing, or worse than that, maybe both were missing. And you were forced into a role of taking care of your siblings. You didn't ask for that role. You didn't want that role, but it was just forced upon you. And you had very or little or no experience whatsoever in doing this. And you just do the best you can. But we ruminate about, well, I could have done better. Mistakes were made, but that's what we ruminate about. Then we can ruminate about sins committed against us, things that people that did us wrong, people that used us, abused us, or whatever you want to talk about. And it's a strange thing that our ruminating minds, if someone compliments us, we don't ruminate on that. It's the negative comments. It's the put downs that we ruminate about. I do a program called Is That Really in the Bible? And I've been called a lot of things. I've been called a false prophet, a fool, an idiot, or whatever. But I get good compliments also. But it's strange that it's not the good compliments that we seem to ruminate about. It's the negative negative things that people say about us that where this vicious cycle of rumination takes place. Philippians 3 and verse 13 says, Brethren, I count not myself to apprehended, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forth into those things which are before. Now, Paul is talking about, obviously, he's talking about his past, and his past was not a pretty life. He persecuted the church, he killed Christians, he referred to himself as the chief of sinners. And that's quite a statement when you think about it. The chief, the number one sinner. If it's one thing I'm good at, it's sinning. Okay. But he says, look, I am forgetting those things which are behind me. All right. How do you forget? Sort of hard to forget, is it not? And I'm not sure I have the answer to that one, but I would say this: just stop it. Just stop it. I mean, is the constant torment? Let me ask you a question: is the constant torment of ruminating doing you this vicious cycle of tormenting thoughts or whatever? Is it doing you any good? Is it helping you mentally, physically, spiritually? Is it helping you at all? Well, you know the answer to that one as well as I. It's not helping at all. Now, I was looking on the internet and I thought, what is the opposite of this vicious cycle of ruminating? And it said the opposite of rumination is to savor. Now, let me repeat that. The opposite of ruminating is to savor. Several years ago at the Feast of Tabernacles, Panama City Beach, was a steakhouse, Angelo's, and they're known for their great steaks, and they have their own seasoning. And we had ordered a steak, my wife and a couple of friends of ours, and the waitress delivered our steak, and she said, now before you eat the steak, they give you a half piece of lemon. It said you squirt that juice on your steak before you take the first bite. And I'm telling you, I don't know what the connection was between the seasoning and the lemon and all that, but my friend took a bite and it was like, oh, you savor. I took a bite and it's just like, man, I don't think I've ever had a steak like that. I mean, you savor the moment, you savor the flavor. So savoring is in many ways the opposite of rumination. It's a focus on replaying positive thoughts and memories, including reminiscing about past accomplishments, things you are grateful for, or uplifting ideas. And I think this is the opposite of this vicious cycle of rumination. The ruminating mind is to savor. I think this is why to write down, to journal how your day goes, your accomplishment, what you do, what you achieve, what you are able to accomplish, that because we forget about it. I know I do. I do a lot in one day and I forget everything I did the whole day. And I think I didn't do anything. But if you write it down, you can look back at, okay, I accomplished a lot this day. I did a lot of good today. And it's important to write that down. Unsurprisingly, the ability to easily recall and reflect on positive memories is associated with less depression and anxiety. Well, that's a no-brainer. Okay. In simplest terms, savoring is the act of prolonging happiness and positive emotions. It requires finding something good in the world and then extending that good feeling through reflection, mindfulness, conversation, what you talk about, writing, again, talking about the importance of to journal, to write this down, or creative expression, like a hobby or something, a way that you creatively do things like photographs, music, or the arts. All this is very important. Music is very important, not just Christian music. I mean, music can change your mood. It can change the way you feel. Music can actually bring you out of rumination, this vicious cycle of spinning around and around and running thoughts through your head over and over again. And it doesn't have to be Christian music. It doesn't necessarily need to be bad music, but I'm not saying there's a lot of music I like that is very good. Now, thinking. Okay, let's talk about thinking in the brain. What does rumination and savoring look like in the brain? Now, we don't have the ability at this point. Eventually, we will to insert a couple of pictures of a brain scan where they took one brain scan, two pictures. One brain scan was of a person who was always in this vicious cycle of rumination. The other brain scan was a picture of a person who was savoring every moment. Both were identical. It was a picture of the front, the back, the side, the frontal lobes, the cortex. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I don't know all the, the language to use there, but the scan revealed that both were lit up with the exact, you could not tell, the color was the same, the images was the same. One was a brain that was caught in the cycle of rumination. The other was a brain of savoring, and they were identical in the way they were lit up. Now, what do we savor? Well, you should savor everything, actually. We're told all things work out for the good to those that love God. Not that everything is good that happens to you, but if God is going to work them out for your good, why not savor them? Okay. What can I find to savor in this moment? There must be something I can savor. In the moment, take some work, because moments, that's not a lot of time. A moment, you got minutes, and then you got hours, and then you got 24-hour period. But in the moment, takes some work. It takes some discipline to savor, to look and to find that thing to savor, because it's moment by moment that you're searching for this. You can talk about all kinds of things that you would savor. Making love to your wife. Obviously, that needs no explaining to savor that. Hopefully, but I'm not just talking about sexual. I'm talking about, holding hands, maybe, just to savor the moment of holding hands, of touching, to savor that. The words "I love you," to savor those words. Your work. Now you might say, well, I can't savor that at all. But, whatever your hand finds to do it with your might. It sounds like the Bible is telling us to savor the things that we're doing. So let's take a typical day. It's time to get up in the morning. And the ruminating mind says, look, I don't want to get up. I do not want to get up. I don't want to even face the day. But I want you to think about it for a moment. You can take a different approach. You can say, now, what do I hear? The senses. What do I hear? What do I see? I hear the birds singing. I hear the wind blowing. Just like this morning, it was blowing 40 miles an hour. And it's easy to get into the cycle, like we live in a pine thicket, where I'm thinking about, you ruminate about, a tree is going to fall on the house. And then you go from there and you start ruminating. Or you can hear the wind and say, that's the Holy Spirit is referred to, is like a powerful wind. And you can imagine that the Holy Spirit is blowing and coming over you, and not worry about it. It's a matter of a different perspective and how you think. The heat pump running, I used to ruminate about that. How much is that costing me? That thing, I hear it running on. Now it's sort of a comfort for me to just hear it. Sort of puts me to sleep to hear it, the crank up and the running of the heat pump. So you get up and you have choices to make. You take a shower, and you savor the hot water that is pouring over your body on a wintry cold day where it's 25 degrees outside. Okay, you savor that. You build a fire. and you savor the beauty and the heat of the fire. You look outside. That's a good thing to do when you get up. Look outside. What do you see? Well, whatever you see, savor it. You know, even when things go wrong, it's easy to fall into that cycle of ruminating. Everything goes wrong. Everything I touch goes wrong. Everything that I do ends up in the dumpster or whatever. It's easy to fall into that ruminating, concept of everything, going wrong in my life. But try to find humor in it. Try to laugh at yourself. Why do we take ourselves so seriously anyway? I just recently I was trying to scrape off the driveway at our church, and I was pulling an 8,000-pound skid steer to do that, and pulled into the church and hit a piece of ice, nearly ran through the church, jackknifed my truck. Now I need a tailgate, a new bed on my truck, and a bumper. Half of my truck's destroyed, and I nearly ran through the church. But that when I think about it, it's sort of funny, that I could do that much damage in one day. Or that you need to. So what? That's the reason you got insurance or whatever. Savoring is hard to do. It requires discipline, and it's continually in the moment. You savor each moment, but there's a lot of moments in each day, in each hour, in each minute. So to discipline ourselves to continue in the moment, savoring everything that we do, even in death. Recently I went to a funeral of my brother-in-law's sister, his sister, I believe, yeah. And you think, okay, death, what's there to savor? It's not. What's a good question, but the memories, you can savor the memories. You can reminisce about the good times. There's, hard to do, but it's something that you can find to savor. Okay, Philippians 4 and verse 8. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of a good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. What is this verse telling us? I mean, it's obviously telling us to look at the positive versus the negative. I mean, to search, to find, to look, to discipline yourselves, your mind, to find the positive. Ruminate on, or you can ruminate, or you can savor. That's a choice that we have. Now, the lesson here is this. Now, what are the practical implications of this study? Now, this was, again, these two pictures, and I wish I could put them up for you, was a real study they did on the ruminating mind caught in the vicious cycle of rumination. Everything's going to hell, whatever. And the image of the mind that savors, it just savors everything. Okay, the two pictures. Okay, actual study that was done. One major takeaway is that those who often get trapped in the negative cycle of rumination also have the capacity to use their brain for savoring and positive thinking. That may be an oversimplified statement. It's easier said than done, is what I'm saying. But the possibility is real. That's what these two images reveal, because they were identical. You could not look at these two images, brain scans, and say, oh, that one's savoring, that one is ruminating. They both were identical in how they were lit up. Okay, so if your brain knows how to ruminate, then your brain knows how to savor. So the question becomes, how will you use your brain today? That's the question. And so Proverbs, in closing here, 25 and verse 28, it says, he whose spirit is without restraint, let's see what version, Revised Standard I'm using. He whose spirit is without restraint is like a city that is broken down and has no wall. okay, without restraint. Okay, you have the choice. Okay, and what you're going to think about, what you have the choice to get caught in this vicious cycle of ruminating about the worst case scenario and replaying it over and over in your mind. You have that choice to make. You can do that. Or you can savor and you can discipline yourself to savor every moment, to savor everything that you can find to savor, which is a lot, actually. So let me repeat this in closing. If your brain knows how to ruminate, and this is what this study revealed. Okay, if your brain knows how to ruminate, then your brain also knows how to savor. So the question becomes, how will you use your brain today?